Hello guys, and welcome to the Expensive Coins History channel. Take a moment and think about how many coins have passed through your hands over the years. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Coins you spent without a second thought. Coins that slipped between couch cushions, disappeared into drawers, or were handed over in silence at a checkout counter. Now imagine this. One of those coins, one you might have ignored, could have been worth more than a luxury car, more than a house in some places, more than what many people save in years. This is not a fantasy. This is where ordinary meets extraordinary. And today, we're stepping into that exact moment through a coin that almost everyone has seen, but almost no one truly understands. The 1978 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent penny. At first glance, it doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shine like gold. It doesn't carry the weight of silver dollars or the mystery of ancient coins. It looks familiar, comfortable, almost invisible, and that is exactly why so many people overlook it. But hidden beneath that ordinary appearance is a story that stretches across decades, a story shaped by history, manufacturing, human error, and something even more powerful, perception. That let's go back for a moment. The year is 1978. The United States is moving through a period of transition. The echoes of earlier decades still linger, but the world is changing fast. Technology is advancing. Economies are shifting, and deep within the machinery of the U.S. Mint, millions upon millions of pennies are being struck with precision, repetition, and routine. Each coin carries the face of Abraham Lincoln, a symbol of endurance, leadership, and unity. For generations, his image has been a constant, a quiet presence in everyday transactions. But in 1978, something subtle was happening, something that most people at the time could never have imagined would matter decades later. Because not all coins are created equal. Even when they are meant to be identical, the reality is different. Tiny variations begin to appear. Differences in pressure, slight misalignments, changes in die condition, microscopic imperfections that escape the eye of workers focused on speed and volume. To the average person, these differences mean nothing. But to a collector, to someone who understands what to look for, these differences can mean everything. Now picture this: a freshly minted 1978 penny drops from a press. It joins thousands of others, then millions. It is bagged, shipped, distributed. It enters circulation like all the rest. It buys candy. It sits in cash registers. It travels across cities, states, and years. Time passes, decades go by. Most of those coins wear down. Their details fade. Their surfaces scratch. They become exactly what people expect them to be: common, forgettable, low-value objects. But not all of them. Some survive. Some are preserved, either by accident or intention. They remain sharp, clean, nearly untouched by time. And within that small group, a few carry something even more unusual, something that sets them apart in a way that only becomes clear much later. This is where the story begins to shift, because value is not just about age. It is not just about rarity. It is about a combination of factors coming together at the right moment: condition, uniqueness, demand, and timing. And when those elements align, the result can be extraordinary. Think about the psychology behind it. Why would someone pay thousands, or even tens of thousands, for a single penny? It sounds unreasonable at first, almost unbelievable. But then you begin to understand. You realize that collectors are not just buying metal. They are buying history. They are buying scarcity. They are buying a piece of a story that cannot be recreated. And in some cases, they are buying something that almost no one else has. The 1978 Lincoln penny, in its highest forms, represents exactly that kind of opportunity. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Not every valuable coin looks different at first glance. Some of the most important features are subtle. You have to slow down. You have to look closely. You have to notice the small things most people miss: the sharpness of Lincoln's profile, the clarity of the lettering, the condition of the edges, the presence or absence of marks that reveal how the coin was handled. And then there are the rarer characteristics, the kinds of details that only appear in a tiny fraction of coins. These are the ones that transform an ordinary penny into something far more significant. Imagine holding two 1978 pennies side by side. To most people, they are identical. But to someone trained, someone who understands, one might be worth a single cent, and the other could be worth a life-changing amount. That difference is not obvious. It is hidden in plain sight. And that is what makes this so powerful, because it means that value can exist without recognition. It can sit quietly, waiting to be discovered. It can pass through hands unnoticed for years, even decades. Now think about your own experience. How many times have you ignored small things because they seemed unimportant? How many opportunities have passed by simply because they didn't stand out? This coin challenges that mindset that it forces you to reconsider what ordinary really means. Because sometimes, the most ordinary objects carry the most extraordinary potential. As the years went on, collectors began to take a closer look at coins from the late 1970s. They started to notice patterns. They started to identify high-grade examples that stood far above the rest. Coins that had somehow escaped circulation. Coins that retained their original brilliance. Coins that looked almost as if they had just been minted. And among those, a few stood out even more. These were coins that reached the highest levels of preservation, the kind that are rarely seen, even by experienced collectors. Coins that were graded at the very top of the scale. And when a coin reaches that level, everything changes, because now, it is no longer just a coin. It becomes a benchmark. It becomes something that defines what is possible within that year, that design, that history. Collectors compete for these coins. They study them. They track their sales. They understand that owning one is not just about possession. It is about status, recognition, and connection to something rare. Now imagine being the person who unknowingly had one of those coins. Imagine finding it in an old jar, a forgotten drawer, a collection passed down through generations. At first, it looks like nothing special. But then, you take a closer look. You notice the shine, the detail, the almost perfect condition. You begin to wonder. And that curiosity leads you down a path that changes everything. Because the truth is, stories like this have happened. People have discovered valuable coins in the most unexpected places. Coins that were overlooked for years, only to be recognized later for what they truly are. And that brings us to the moment that everyone waits for. The realization. The point where everything you thought you knew shifts. Because the 1978 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent penny, in its most exceptional form, has reached a value that defies expectations. A value that turns a simple coin into something extraordinary. A value that makes people stop and rethink every penny they've ever handled. $91,000. Let that sink in. A single cent transformed into $91,000. Not because it was gold, not because it was ancient, but because it represented something rare, something preserved, something almost impossible to replicate. And that is the power of this story. It is not just about a coin. It is about awareness. It is about understanding that value is not always visible at first glance. It is about realizing that the things we overlook can sometimes hold the greatest potential. The next time you see a penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look, because you never know what might be hiding in plain sight. Now let that thought stay with you for a moment. Because what we're about to explore next doesn't just continue the story. It deepens it in a way that becomes even more unexpected, even more powerful, and for many people, even more unbelievable. Because if the 1978 penny showed us how something ordinary can quietly grow into something extraordinary, the 1970s Abraham Lincoln 1-cent penny takes that idea and pushes it even further into a place where rarity, precision, and mystery collide. Again, it begins the same way. A coin, small, lightweight, easily ignored. But the moment you hear 1970s, something changes, at least for those who understand what that small s represents. That single letter stands for the San Francisco Mint, a place known not just for producing coins, but for producing coins that often carry a different level of detail, care, and in some cases, unintended uniqueness. Back in 1970, the United States was going through another period of transformation. The mint was working under pressure, producing coins in massive numbers to meet demand. Machines were running continuously. Dies were being used, reused, and replaced. And in that fast-moving process, small variations began to emerge, variations that, at the time, meant nothing. But today, they mean everything. Because among the millions of 1970s pennies that were produced, a tiny number came out different. Not dramatically different. Not in a way that would catch the eye of someone casually spending change. But different enough that, years later, collectors would stop, look closer, and realize they were seeing something rare, something special. Now imagine the environment in which these coins were made. Noise, heat, movement, speed. Coins being struck over and over again, each one meant to match the last. But perfection in mass production is never absolute. There are always slight inconsistencies, slight shifts, slight imperfections that slip through, and sometimes those imperfections create something unique. This is where the 1970s penny becomes more than just another coin, because within that year, within that mint mark, lies one of the most fascinating aspects of coin collecting. The idea that a tiny detail, almost invisible, can completely redefine value. Collectors began noticing that certain 1970s pennies displayed characteristics that didn't align with the standard design. Subtle doubling in the lettering, slight variations in spacing, features that suggested something unusual had happened during the minting process. To most people, these details are easy to miss, but to someone who knows what to look for, they stand out immediately. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. This is where attention becomes everything, because the difference between an ordinary 1970s penny and an extraordinary one is not size, or color, or weight. It is detail, precision, observation, and that's what makes this coin so compelling. It challenges you to slow down. Look closer. Question what you think you see. Now think about how many coins from 1970 have passed through circulation. Millions, most of them worn, faded, used, but somewhere among them, a few remained untouched, preserved in a way that allowed their original features to survive. And among those, an even smaller number carried the unique characteristics that collectors search for. These are not coins you find every day. These are not coins that appear in large numbers. These are the kinds of coins that, when they do appear, create attention, conversation, competition, because collectors understand something very important. Rarity is not just about how many were made. It is about how many exist today in a condition and form that makes them desirable, and that number can be incredibly small. Now imagine holding one of these coins. At first, it feels like nothing special, just another penny. But then you begin to examine it. You tilt it under light. You study the lettering. You notice something slightly different. A detail that shouldn't be there, or a detail that appears in a way you didn't expect. And in that moment, everything changes, because you realize you might be holding something rare, something valuable, something that has quietly existed without recognition. This is the moment that collectors live for, the moment of discovery, the moment when knowledge meets opportunity. And it's a reminder of something deeper. That value often hides beneath the surface, waiting for someone to notice. Now let's take that idea even further, because what makes the 1970s penny truly remarkable is not just its rarity. It is the journey it has taken, from the moment it was struck, to the years it spent in circulation or storage, to the moment it is finally recognized for what it is. Every step adds to its story, and collectors don't just buy the coin, they buy that story. They buy the history, the mystery, the idea that this small piece of metal has survived decades and emerged as something special. And when that story aligns with condition, when the coin is not only rare but also preserved at an exceptional level, the result is something extraordinary. Because now, you are no longer looking at a common object. You are looking at something that represents the highest level of its kind. A coin that stands above millions of others from the same year. A coin that few people will ever own. And that is where value transforms. Because in the world of collecting, the best examples are always the most sought after. They become benchmarks. They become the coins that define what is possible. And when they appear, they don't go unnoticed. Collectors compete, prices rise, attention grows, and suddenly, something that once passed through everyday life becomes the center of focus. Now pause for a second and think about what that really means. It means that something small, something overlooked, can become something powerful. It means that value is not always obvious. It means that awareness can change everything. And that brings us to the moment that ties this entire story together. Because just like the 1978 penny revealed its hidden potential, the 1970s penny reaches a level that is even more astonishing. A level that challenges expectations. A level that forces people to rethink what a single cent can represent. $106,000. Let that settle in. A coin that most people would never look at twice, now standing at a value of $106,000. Not because it was meant to be rare, not because it was designed to be valuable, but because of a combination of factors: detail, preservation, scarcity, and time. And that is the real lesson here, that it's not just about coins, that it's about perspective, that it's about understanding that the things we ignore can sometimes hold incredible potential. It's about realizing that value often exists quietly, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. So the next time you come across an old coin, don't rush past it. Don't assume you already know its worth. Take a closer look, because hidden within something as simple as a penny, there could be a story, an opportunity, and a value far greater than you ever imagined. And sometimes, that discovery begins with nothing more than a second glance.